So I spent a lot of time on this channel giving feedback on the story that we've actually had delivered. You know, a new Living World patch will come out or an expansion will come out, and I'll review and talk about all the things that happened and, you know, what landed well, what didn't necessarily land so well. But someone brought something really interesting to my attention the other day, and it's that I haven't really talked to you guys about where I want the story to go, what kind of exciting stuff Tyria has to offer, and where the devs may actually deliver on that. And it's an especially interesting question to wonder about right now because the game is so unpredictable here. We've got an expansion coming out soon called End of Dragons. They're suggesting that the dragon storyline, which is everything this game has ever been, is coming to a close. We have a quote from someone, a dev on the forums or an employee on the forums, saying that all the living world ever has been building to the next X-Pack. Hell, even the end of the Iceberg Saga right now is difficult to predict whether one dragon will die, two dragons will die, or what the hell's going to go on. So, yeah, I kind of took a little bit of time today. Now, don't take this too seriously, but I hashed out what I think would be a really cool direction for the game to go in. Maybe it'll be inspiring to some of you guys. And we'll see whether ArenaNet ends up going anywhere near any of what I'm about to say. So it's obviously really hard to predict because they may have a very, very big core idea that could be completely left field that comes in with End of Dragons and then that defines the rest of the story. Which obviously I'm not going to put all eggs in one basket. So I'll try and make safe guesses, general ideas about where the story might go in the future. And also, just to be clear, for the purposes of this video and this thought exercise and all the stuff I've written out here, I'm assuming that we're staying in Guild Wars 2. I'm not really entertaining or thinking about the possibilities of a Guild Wars 3 here. I'm kind of assuming that Guild Wars 2 will work like this. There'll be an expansion and then a Living World season while they develop the next expansion, and then a season while they develop the next expansion. And, you know, they may break that format. Any number of things might happen, but I'll make these safe guesses to sort of give you guys some ideas of what I want to see going forward. So first of all, let's talk about the Iceberg Saga. How do I actually want this to end? Well, you guys who follow me a lot know that I'm a big Primordus fanboy, and I really don't like the idea of Primordus essentially suddenly appearing a part of the saga and then being killed in it. I really don't like that idea. I want to get a lot more from Primordus. So here's what I've got written for the Iceberg Saga. I do think Jormag will die or should die by the end of this. I think it's the end of this dragon. There are some ideas that maybe she could end up being good and on our side. I'm not going to opt for that. I think she'll be dead. And with it, I think Ryland will die too. However, what I'd really like to see is Bangar continue to be a character. I'm really enjoying Bangar. And what I'd like to see is once Jormag is out of the picture, that he is no longer a thrall, and he goes back to the Char, he does his own thing, and I'd like to see him be kind of an anti-hero. A little bit like we've seen some of the characters in the past. Canuck was closest, but like a really rough guy, a guy that does not like us, a guy that would be almost outright violent to us. He is not our friend. However, sometimes our objectives may ally, and you know, he's in their picture a bit. I really want a kind of edgy character like that. I think he's amazing, and I think he should be with this game long term. I love Bangar, so I'd like to see him survive the Iceberg Saga. Also, I've got written here, Primordus frenzied escape to the south, / the depths. So what I would actually really like to see is Primordus doesn't die here, but he is awake, and he is a massive threat. And here's the thing, we have Bram essentially control Primordus to leave. And he just tries to drive this raging, crazed Elder Dragon of Destruction away. And he just so happens to drive it south, through the depths. That's the idea that I most like. And what this does is this kind of puts us on a timer for getting to Cantha. Now, we have kind of heard in an interview that there'll be a little bit of interim content. So I do have some ideas for that. In between, after Iceberg Saga's over and Jormag's out of the picture, I like the idea of, in this interim content, the Aether Blades come back. This is a really good opportunity for this, I think. We can learn a little bit more with My Trin and what exactly was going on with them. Perhaps when the Aether Blades return, we'll find out that they collected Blish in the Mists, and Blish will return to the story, but maybe he's been augmented, or, you know, just modified in some way, which means that he now is allied with the Aether Blades. I think that's a really fun pairing to put him with them, and maybe he just likes them more. Maybe he's mad that the commander never went to go get him or something. And with this, they could eventually start tying into Timey's illness and so on. I don't think all of that will happen in the interim content, but the introduction of it there. I also think it might be kind of cool if they're bringing the Aether Blades back. that they decide to explain what Scarlet's task was for them out there, and that maybe Scarlet was in the know about a lot of this and she had an idea for these end time moments. That would be pretty interesting. Also, I would like to see, if it's going to be a long wait for End of Dragons, I'd like to see a new location. I would like to see one new map, and that map, I think, should be the Battle Isles. It should be the halfway point between here and Cantha, and we get to spend some time. Maybe the Zaishan from POF, because we'll technically still be in the POF era as well at that point. Maybe the Zaishan kind of get a little bit of a look in right here at the end. You know, they were there at the start of POF, and they can be there at the very last moment. We can talk about the Battle Isles a bit. Maybe this can be a good opportunity to talk a little bit more about the gods as well, because we do know there's an entrance to the mists and stuff over there, and which we once entered for Hall of Heroes and so on. I mean, the lore on that's a little bit flimsy, but hey, I think the Battle Isles are a good location, and then we would be in End of Dragon. So for End of Dragons, I think the location obviously should be Cantha. I mean, we already know that's what's going to be happening. A big plot line and thing I'd like to see here is that the Dominion of Winds opens up. They kind of already hinted at that a bit with this Champions release. And, you know, that those Tengu are helping us. They're running down, and there'll be some kind of conflict between those Tengu and the people who pushed them out once upon a time, and the xenophobia there. I think a big story that I want to see in End of Dragons is an explanation about Mother. Now, I'm not going to go into a full discussion about who Mother is or whatever. We've talked about that before. Is it a spirit of the wild? Is it Coda? Is it any of these things? I don't know. But I think that it is the expansion's duty to talk about Mother. And then I actually think the expansion, yes, it can have Kunavang. Yes, I think it will have the Deep Sea Dragon. But what I'd like is Primordus, in my view of this, we've all been going on about Fire v Ice so much. But I think going Fire v Water would be a good idea. The devs once gave an explanation of Path of Fire, a synopsis, a one-line synopsis of Path of Fire, as God versus Dragon. I think that End of Dragons, if they're going to do the same thing, it's Dragon v Dragon. And I think that this is what we should see. We can see Fire and Ice. And this gives me the opportunity to have Primordus as the last one alive. But I do think by the time of End of Dragons, I think that we are leaving the End of Dragon, the Elder Dragon arc. I think they're all dealt with, seriously. And we will have our conclusion. The tagline for the expansion is "The cycle is reborn." And I think we will see that. As a matter of the cycle being reborn, what does this mean? Are we going to have new entities in place by the end of the expansion? Are we going to have a bunch of, like, eggs thrown around? Are we going to have a bunch of prismatic magic that's flung about? I don't know, but I think that the idea will be that Teria is in possession of all that Elder Dragon magic spread out everywhere. And we'll move into a new phase of storytelling where it's not about dragons that already have all the magic. It's about greedy societies and civilizations and populations around the world that are now trying to grab it. And how warmongers try to rise and how dictators try to rise, and, you know, we're caught in the middle of all this chaos as everybody's grabbing at whatever they can, and suddenly people who had no power before suddenly have a lot, and all the turbulence that comes from that. Again, this might be the moment where in actuality the devs want to move us onto a whole new game or something, but they could continue to tell this story in Guild Wars 2. I think by the end of Dragons as well, I think Aurene will be out of the picture in some way. Is she dead? Is she off on her own adventures? Is she whatever? I don't know. But I think she will be gone. I don't think it's realistic that forevermore in Guild Wars, all storylines, we, the commander, have an Elder Dragon at our beck and call. It is the end of Dragons. The cycle will be reborn. Aurene's not going to be around after this. That's how I really feel about it. And also, with the death of Primordus, I think a big emotional, bittersweet beat at the end of all of this. I think Bram dying in End of Dragons, as Primordus does. I think there could be some epic, interesting stuff there, and that might be where they go. So, now we start to get really juicy. What might they do in Season 5? And I'm assuming they'll call them seasons, not sagas, because I do think the idea would be to have them as bridges between expansions. Well, I've got a bunch of stuff I think that really they should look at nice and quick. First of all, a storyline about a potential pale tree that has been petrified in the Echovald forest, and an explanation that the Wardens are distant cousins of the Sylvari. I think some kind of story for Sylvari players to really latch onto might be nice around now. It has been a long time since Heart of Thorns. And, you know, this just works super well. It's been a long theory of mine that I like, and I'd love to see that come back. I'd also love to see the depths open up as a location in Season 5. Lots of deep, underground, cavey locations. Now, why? Well, because there's no Primordus anymore. So the Asura can return home, right? Just as, by the way, the Norn could be returning north. Maybe you could do a story about that, the Norn going to the far Shiver Peaks here. But the Asura returning to the depths and seeing what they find there, I think could be really fascinating. And especially, I like the idea of the Inquest. You know, there's this suggestion that the Inquest know a lot of stuff that maybe we don't. Perhaps it turns out the Inquest are in communication with some Asura that survived down there, like subterranean Asura or something. And, you know, we can start to get storylines there. With a return to the depths as well, I think finally we'll be able to go to the Bloodstone Caverns. So in the Straits of Devastation, there is this cave, and there's probably a Bloodstone here. Now, with all the Elder Dragons gone and all the magic in abundance, I think we could move into an area of storytelling where the Bloodstones become really important again, and people are trying to get at them to unlock them, grab their power. And maybe the commander is now going to be on a quest to secure these Bloodstones, figure out where they are, keep them safe. And that leads them to these caves here. Perhaps you don't actually get them available. Now, I like the idea that after the Elder Dragons are done, we have clear, self-contained storylines that new players to the franchise don't need to have played like an epic amount of previous content to understand. So, for example, if I want to understand End of Dragons, well, I'm going to need to know about Arid and stuff, so I'm going to need to play the Iceberg Saga and Season 4. And then if I want to really understand that, I probably should play POF. But now there's Balthazar, and I only really learn about Balthazar in Season 3. Well, Season 3 is really the fallout of Morgemoth. Well, Morgemoth really comes from Scarlet, and you get my problem. And you even have the issue of Season 1. I think for the era of Guild Wars 2 after End of Dragons, they should be much more localized in their storytelling. Like, when a new expansion comes out, a lot of that stuff in that expansion is self-contained, and it's mostly understandable even for someone who's just jumping in. It can tap at and draw at existing lore, but it's not reliant on it, not to the extent we've had so far. All of that said, as much as I want each new package now to be a bit more secular, is that the right word? I do think that they can build up to a broader story, and the next big story after the Elder Dragons are gone, I think would be really cool, is like some kind of massive Tyrian world war, in which, yeah, there's all this power struggling going on, and so many different factions grabbing at whatever they can in this frenzy after the Elder Dragons are over. And so, when we start talking about the Bloodstones, maybe in this season, we re-establish them, we explore towards them, we go to the Straits of Devastation and so on, but we ultimately don't get a hold of them. Maybe by the end of this storyline, the Inquest has it. Or, you know, some subterranean Skrit have it, right? Or maybe some Asura that never came to the surface and so on. You can start touching on these ideas. Another great point here as well, by the way, is if we're going to the depths after we've been to Cantha, you can introduce this idea of a dredge tunnel. In lore, there is an idea of a tunnel that goes from the Shiver Peaks down to Cantha, all underground, and that might be a cool place to visit at that point in the story. But yeah, this idea of lots of Asura that are going to the depths. Around now, you could start dealing with Timey as well, I think. Next, as well, I think a really cool thing for Season 5 would be Lissa's Realm in the Mists. So you'll notice that during End of Dragons, I never talked about the idea of Lissa as like a big plot point. The reason I did that is because I think ArenaNet have got so many stories to do, and so much to think about and talk about, they have to be very careful to, like, be refined in their focus. So I actually think, leave the Lissa stuff not in End of Dragons, leave it off for Season 5, pay it off there. And so, yes, that can be one of the new maps. We go back to the Mists, and we learn a little bit more about what the hell happened with the Mirror. They finally conclude the Balthazar stuff. They may even like to talk about Menzies, his half-brother, and and his potential beheading and all of that kind of stuff. I think those stories can happen there in Season 5, after End of Dragons, but still, you know, as a part of it. Who knows, they may bundle it all together. These aren't predictions, they're just, I think, safe bets of how I would probably play it out. Next, as well, I think a big thing that should happen around Season 5, there are no dragons anymore. It's a big thing in the world. I think the Pact should dissolve. There should be a little bit of story about that there is no more Pact. What the Pact fighting if there are no dragons? And even on top of that, not just the Pact, but the Vigil. The Vigil were only really founded to fight the dragons. Now, you could have a world in which there's kind of a Neo-Vigil that comes out of it, maybe led by Javi or something, and this Neo-Vigil, they're there to fight ghosts and haunted areas and demons. You know, I think the idea that maybe we'll start seeing more demons and stuff from the Mists after the Elder Dragons is over is a good idea. So you might find a new idea of a Vigil, but they would have a new name and a new title, and generally speaking, especially the Pact, they dissolve. And what I'd like to see going forwards is more emphasis on the individual factions, the Neo-Vigil, the Order of Whispers and what they're doing, the Dermond Priory. Maybe these large institutions start butting heads a little bit more. And, they're not so goody-goody up against one another all the time. Now that their common threat, the Elder Dragons, is gone, right? And you got to think a lot of peace that's in the world right now, like say the peace between the humans and the Char, is there because the Elder Dragons are a greater threat. As soon as they're gone, these tensions should return. And so that's what I would like to see. More emphasis on the orders, something I feel like the game hasn't really satisfied to this day. You'd also get a bit of Logan's story here, I think, as well, with the dissolution of the Pact. And finally, for Season 5, I think a really cool special little moment is the Wizard's Tower going missing. So the Wizard's Tower as a floating tower, you know, it's mobile. It used to actually be within the Dominion of Winds. During Guild Wars 1, it was like here. But it's moved. It's outside of the... Why did it move? We don't know. But I think it should vanish. I think players should log in. Maybe it's a big part of a storyline or something. But it's not there anymore. And you're like, what the hell? And that's like a big tease and a big setup, and nobody really knows what arena it's doing. It adds even more mystery to the idea. And maybe the people of Garenhof talk a little bit more about it. A story for a later day. So after Season 5, we would be looking at Expansion 4. So here, let me throw this art up on screen. This is a world map that we saw or in the Dermond Priory archives. The carpet texture had all these different locations. So just to be clear, Tyria, as we've currently explored, is this central section only, with Cantha down here, and that's it. Now you notice that some of these continents off in the distance, they feel perfectly sized for just like an expansion to be in. And you'll even notice there are trade routes leading to some of them. So I would start prioritizing these, and especially the ones that have trade routes. We're going to explore them. Now, I think the main story at play right now is hunting the Bloodstone shards, because they're really important to not fall in the wrong hands. And we don't know where some of them are. And I like the idea that one of them is off on this location off on the top left. Now, me and Shaman back in the day did translate the new Crichton on this. We think that the name of this is called the Sunrise Crest, these two islands here. Here's an alternate fan map. It's uncredited. I don't know who made it, but it's on the wiki. So thanks to whoever made this. But bear in mind, the text here is not necessarily canon. It's what me and Shaman translated, and then the fan maps came after. And one of those continents is called the Arid Continent. So I think just have a whole expansion here. And it's completely self-contained. New players can get in and enjoy it. There are new cultures, new environments, new antagonists. Everything about it is new and fresh, and you know, we're kind of in a whole new world of Guild Wars 2, where we're not just retreading Guild Wars 1, we're in a whole new world. And that's what Expansion 4 is. I think that could be very exciting. Now, a little bit of pre-existing lore could sneak in. You've got the idea of the Lost Bloodstone as a plotline. But also, I like the idea that maybe some Norn managed to adventure out here a long time ago. Maybe some Norn, since Jormag left, have started adventuring again. And in particular, there is a character that I wanted to be in the Iceberg Saga that hasn't been. Now, that is Newt Whitebear's wife. She's called Gaeta. She's the... What's her title? The Mind Flayer. Really interesting, mysterious character in the background we haven't met yet. I like the idea she's been off having these big, bold adventures over in this expansion. And I want this expansion to have a lot of Norn, because I don't think the Iceberg Saga did Norn stuff well enough. So let's have like a cell of Norn over there. And you do the whole expansion there. Now, what I'd like for Season 6, following that expansion, is that they essentially take this second giant island, and we're kind of continuing the expansion storyline in a lot of ways. And many of the maps we go to in that following season are exploring this subcontinent, this arid one, as it's so called on the map. And, you know, in this way, there's this really profound, strong feeling of continuing the story from the X-Pack. So all those new people that got in on Expansion 4, kind of, they feel very, very tightly ingrained in this new stuff that's going on. But as well as that, what I think that the devs should do going forwards is have an expansion explore new areas, and have the Living World seasons look back at all the existing areas as much as possible. Now, they can still add new maps. They could just be maps adjacent to where we were before. But I don't think... I think like a new Vabby map around now or something shouldn't be off the cards. We should be able to get more story about what the Vabians are doing. That's the idea of the living world, right? You want to realize that in some way. And especially now that we're in a world, I think, where it's about the societies gathering power. You know, maybe I want to check in with the Vabians at some point, see what they're up to, right? Check in at Corner, check in with the Sun Spears and what they're doing at Istan. So maybe finally now, it's during this season, we get to go to the Matani Keys. It's like a bit of an update. It doesn't have to exclusively be off near the Sunrise Crest, right? But that's what I think it should be. Expansions, totally new areas. Living World expands on existing places, you know, just updates them a little bit. And, you know, they can be big, expansive, you know, wide scope releases, but they're all building to this idea of this big world war that's coming, I suppose. So yeah, during this season, this would be season 6, guys. I think it'd be really cool if we found, like, Malik's tree finally at this point. Maybe one of the missing Firstborn. There's a couple of Firstborn we know nothing about. Maybe they traveled off, they found another tree, and then they convinced all those Sylvari, those naive Sylvari over there, before that, you know, maybe they were just about to be born, that they are the be-all and end-all, that they're their god or something. Maybe it's like a megalomaniacal Sylvari that's controlling them or something. I think that could be a really fun story. Also, I'd love to have about now, I keep mentioning the Path of Fire, is more information about the Awakened. I think a really cool story going forwards is that the Awakened as a faction are growing in strength, in autonomy, and what they actually start doing is taking advantage of the Unchained in Ore. I'd love some stuff around the Scavenger's Causeway in which we find that the Awakened are quite savvy in getting new thralls and getting extra help. And just the idea of these two varieties of undead interacting. I've wanted to see this for so long. They're close to each other, and maybe we can get a bit of a story here. And now we've got like another faction that's a potential threat or something, or has their own ambitions on the pile. It's just more wood for the tinderbox that they're eventually building to, right? So that'd be about then. What else did I have for Season 6? Oh yes, Season 6 I think could end with the Lion's Arch attack. So Lion's Archer's got all these big embattlements and defenses. We've never seen them use them. There's also that concept art of a tidal wave attacking Lion's Arch with like a Hydra. We've always assumed that's a deep sea dragon related thing. I actually think let's kind of twist that. By the time we were this late in on the storytelling, I think people would kind of have discounted that Hydra thing because the deep sea dragon's dead at this point. But I think now suddenly the Hydra can attack. I think Lion's Arch can defend itself, which is a fun take. Lion's Arch is always getting attacked, but it actually defends itself comfortably. Get a little bit more with the Captain's Council and Ellen Keel here. But the question is, where the hell did this Hydra come from? And that leads into Expansion 5. So going back to our handy map, I think that this would be a good location now. This is called the Sunken Islands. If you translate this, we've never seen this. We have no idea what it is. Kind of near the Battle Isles. And now, finally, I think you could have an underwater heavy expansion. Right now, I think ArenaNet's too crunched and they don't have enough time or ambition to really pull off a great underwater X-Pack. So I do not believe Cantha should be about that. I think Cantha can have watery themes and can give us time on the Jade Sea and stuff, but it itself does not have to have that much underwater stuff. But I think now, by the time we're at Expansion 5, we can finally do something here. And I think at this point, we can look at the Lagos and we can find out much more about them. Go to their cities under the water. We can learn more about the Blue Orb from the core storyline and maybe the orbs in general. Maybe there's lots of them and these are powerful artifacts people are starting to hoard, these different societies. So yeah, an expansion that is heavily underwater themed, the Sunken Islands, what sunk the islands and why. Again, same as with the Sunrise Crest expansion. It's a self-contained thing with its own antagonist and so on, but it draws a little bit existing stuff. In this case, it's the Lagos. I also think at the same time with this expansion, because the Sunken Isles is probably a little bit small, and I know it's not geographically nearby, I would like at this point the story to take us to the Isles of Janthir. And perhaps we say that the devastation we see up at the Isles of Janthir is somehow related to the Sunken Islands. And the reason I say that I want this in expansion is because, you know, you might say the Isles of Janthir should only be delivered during the Masart storyline or through Living World or something. But I feel like when they give us a new area of the world in the Living World, I'm just not excited about it. So I want the new areas always to be in expansions. And that's why I want this region up here. Maybe this Delta can become available at some point around now too. You know, Delta, Watery, something like that. Or perhaps right around the season afterwards. But yeah, that's my concept for Expansion 5. The season following it, once again, we'd just follow up with the story and make sure that everything's rounded out quite nice. Looking back to Tyria for the season, as always. I think Bangar, who I've had kicking about and, you know, hopefully has had moments in the story up until now. I think we could do a really big storyline with him again. Maybe this like weird power struggle with the Char that would have been left simmering for years now, IRL at this point. We can do a proper Khan story now, where the Char once again are going at it. They've unified under Khan with no Elder Dragon to pressure them. They're looking back at the humans, or perhaps some particularly antagonistic humans. That kind of goes against what they did in the DRM at Ebonhawk. Because everything that ArenaNet does now is just we're buddying up constantly. But maybe we could start looking at that. In particular, where I'd like to go is more to the east, beyond the Blaze Ridge Mountains, and to the Ash Legion homelands. We haven't really seen the Ash Citadel or any of that stuff, so I think now is the time for that. More stuff with Ephraim and where he set up his new Flame Legion. I think that would be very good. Looking at the Order of Whispers as well, I think we can advance that story now. In Path of Fire, we had the idea of the Order of Shadows, right? Who are very distinct from Whispers and may actually be total scumbags. I like the idea that maybe the Order of Shadows completely infiltrates and like overtakes the Order of Whispers. And now, who we once viewed as a friendly faction, we can no longer. You know, the Order of Whispers may be working against us, and they're becoming a powerful faction of some kind. I think that's all pretty juicy Season 7 stuff that would keep us occupied for a long time. Another expansion. I would look at either this the bottom two regions, the one called Gwenye or Kim Day. Now, to be clear, Gwenye and Kim Day, these are the names that we translated in New Crichton on these, but they are just the names of artists at ArenaNet. This cannot really be canon information, and therefore a lot of the place names for all these areas is probably not canon either. Like the area called Not Real, or I think they named an area Misandry. This really does seem to have been two artists kind of messing about, and they've got their names on these continents. So I don't think these continents would actually be called this, but we'd pick one of these, and we'd be exploring there. I think about now, another unresolved storyline that I'd really like to see is the meaning behind the cliffside fractal, and the giant Colossus guy that kind of bows to us and then teleports away. We could do all of this, and we could tie that up with the Carnair stuff that we were building up from the previous season. Season 8, there's still a ton more locations we still haven't got to. I'd like to see this Delesio Seaboard finally get added to the game. Lots of human and Crichton stuff. I think it's been a while since we've had any real stories for them. Lake Region, I would love to see finally around now. Maybe we can go north of the Bandit Brisbane Bridge, because we're going into kind of a human kind of queen story. I actually like the idea of a regicide plot. Like the queen is assassinated and we don't know who did it. Was it because of the new Char stuff that's going on? Was it because of the new Order of Whispers stuff that was going on? Was it someone else? We're kind of trying to solve this. At this point, I think finally E can step forwards and we resolve the mystery of E and what's going on. Just lots of human stuff. Maybe other areas of Lake Doric that never got implemented in the end. Maybe now is when we go to the Verdant Cascades and more of the Delta. I really think that there's enough there that we could be having a lot of fun. And here as well, I think we could look back at the Wizard's Tower that had gone missing. You can tie these together. And right about this time, I would like to actually take a look here. This is an area that you could explore in Pre-Searing Ascalon in Guild Wars 1. It's called the Wizard's Fife. And there's actually a second Wizard's Tower in this location. And I'd like us to explore this Wizard's Tower, figure out what's going on, find its connection to the other one, and then discover wherever the new one had moved to. And I think that the new one could have moved into the location of the next expansion, maybe. It could have traveled into the Mists. So yes, I think expansion 9 could finally be Zoteka and all the Utopia stuff. We could have an expansion purely in the Rift. At this point, the devs can reintroduce Desmina, the cliffhanger from the Hall of Chains raid, and what she's been up to. And, you know, they can talk about Baltec, the seeming time traveler from Guild Wars 1. And we can really start dealing with these. We can have a big mix of lots of old plots. And the Wizard's Tower is finally discovered and explored around there. If we're doing the Zoteka stuff, we can be looking at the gods again. What existed before the gods. They could talk about Arachnia again for once. There could be like a big conflict. I want the enemy in one of these expansions to be the Titans again, for what it's worth. And I've always liked the idea that the Wizard's Tower was like a Titan foundry. So maybe we do that at this point. And then finally, with all of that, I think we could probably now expand into like the World War thing, where we've got so many factions and so much is going on. Everybody starts fighting one another. And expansion 10 or around season 9 or somewhere around here, that's kind of what the big like end game moment for Guild Wars is. And what I think would be really cool, if we're this late, we're dealing with like 2020, 2025, sorry, 2030, 2035. At that point with Guild Wars, I really do think the devs would be looking to move on from this engine in this game at that point, probably. You know, this is a lot of story. I've just given you like easily a decade of stuff that they could do. And if they were going to do a full-on end to Guild Wars, the way I would really like it to end is like this big world war or whatever maybe doesn't get resolved in a nice way. And Terrier is truly messed up. Remember what Morgemoth said? To go against the Elder Dragons is to embrace oblivion. Maybe this whole second arc, this second act to the whole game, essentially ends up proving him and the Elder Dragons right, that these petty mortals squabbling over this power ruin themselves with it, destroy the planet, and we have to go to a new one. Well, don't worry, because the gods have returned and given us that opportunity or something. Maybe we learn about the humans' original homeworld or a new one. Don't forget in Path of Fire, they did pretty much explicitly say that the gods were looking for a new world. And yeah, I think it would open up the idea of a whole new world and the races travel there or something. And that would be like your Guild Wars 3 or something way off in the year 2030, 2040. Oh, and for good measure, the final beat of the whole game, I think, has to be the Scepter of Ore again. Just as Guild Wars 1 put so much emphasis on it at the end, and then, you know, we didn't see it in Guild Wars 2, it's this big mystery. I'd love to see another glimpse of the Scepter of Ore. And everyone's like, oh, what the hell's this all about? And we move into Guild Wars 3 at that point. So yeah, that's just kind of my thought. Or, you know, they stay with this one and just keep doing more story. That's kind of like a lot of the stories that I'd like to see. Maybe something of a coherent order to get through them in. Just some wild, kind of crazy speculation that gets more vague as we go further along. But yeah, I do think the Guild Wars Tyria has a lot to say and a lot to tell after the Elder Dragons are over. And maybe this has been somewhat interesting to some of you guys. So thanks very much for watching. Let me know what you think. Give me your ideas for your stories. Any big mysteries or concepts that I didn't get to here. And I'll see you next time. I do want to add again that this isn't really a prediction necessarily. My real money is on the idea we might be in Guild Wars 3 way before all this, but we'd see.